Every public institution in this election has come under fire, and I think you look at the polling on this, and public confidence is at all-time lows when it comes to the government. And so really it's a question of, will there be this bipartisan commitment moving forward to try to restore the public's faith in these institutions? It's not really clear to me at this stage that there will be, but I think there is an incentive.
But you know what I can see for the future, Paul? I can see lots and lots of congressional hearings.
Oh, totally. As long as the Republicans continue to control the House, if there's a Democratic president, they will have lots of fun investigating the president. I think this is why you don't fire the FBI director, because that would sort of suggest that the whole thing was political. So whoever the next president is should stand by this director and say, we're going to move forward with an institution we trust, and we're not going to worry about what happened during the election cycle.
All right, good.
We'll see if it works.
Exactly. The conversation continues. Thanks to all of you for being with me this morning. A bit of sad news. Well, actually, it is sad news to pass along. The nation's first female Attorney General, Janet Reno, has died. Reno served under President Bill Clinton from 1993 to 2001, overseeing several tense episodes, including the standoff at Waco, Texas, and the saga of Elian Gonzalez, the young Cuban refugee. She also authorized the investigation into Clinton's relationship with Monica Lewinsky. Reno died at the age of 78 after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. As an excuse not to vote tomorrow, a lot of sunshine on the map. Voters in South Central states might have to dodge a little bit of rain, but not much. One thing is for sure, nothing stopped a lot of voters from getting to the polls over the weekend. Thousands of people waiting for hours outside, many places staying open late to accommodate everyone in line, a move not sitting well with Donald Trump.
It is a rigged system. And be careful with the voting. Be careful with everything. You watch everything, folks, because we're going to win. We don't want it taken away from us. We don't want it taken away.
With me now to talk about this, Kayleigh McEnany, CNN political commentator and Donald Trump supporter, and Jennifer Granholm, former Michigan governor and senior advisor of Correct the Record and Hillary Clinton supporter. Welcome.
Thanks,
Are you
Carol.
excited?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh,
very excited.
Totally.
Yes.
I do too, and we're in this beautiful setting, and I can't wait. And I think that the long lines, when you see long lines of people waiting to vote, it's always a great thing.
Oh my
isn't
gosh,
it, right?
It's totally great. I was just talking with David Pepper, who's the executive director of the Ohio Democratic Party, and he was saying that the lines in Ohio were so long. They had all this entertainment out. People were having a great time. People were passing out their barbecue. I mean, it's people turned it into a festive
That's what America's about.
It is. It's great.
Exactly. On that note, why is Donald Trump criticizing elections officials for keeping the polling places open to accommodate all of those people who are waiting in lines, some up to 2 hours to get to vote?
You know, I think he had heard that some polling locations had remained open, others had not, so he was concerned. You're absolutely right that you have a legal right if you show up at the poll by 7 p.m. or whatever time the poll closes, you have a right to vote, no matter how long the line is. So I think he just wants to ensure everything is fair, everything is kosher, much like the Democrats want to ensure there's no voter suppression in states like North Carolina. So I think there's concern on both sides. The stakes are very high.
But if you are in line, let's just be clear about that. If you're in line before the time of the polls closing, even if the line it goes for another 2 hours, you have the right to vote.
Yes, that's right. So be
Stay in
patient.
line, be patient, block it out.
Pack your patience. Pretend you're going to the airport.
Bring your games, whatever it is.
I do want to get more into what Mr. Trump said about those lines. He said specifically, be careful with the voting. We don't want it taken away from us. What does he mean by that, Kayleigh?
I think he wants to make sure that everyone who shows up, first of all, is registered to vote, is not showing up to vote in place of someone who, you know, we know there are 4 million dead voters on the voting rolls. That's from J. Christian Adams, who worked
We also
for the
know that
Justice
those
Department.
voters didn't get to the right.
But there is
never actually voted.
There are issues with this. I hear in Florida, that I'm a Florida voter, on the radio, they say that there are instances of people sending in ballots, filling out ballots that aren't theirs and sending them in. So he wants people to be on guard and be alert. And I don't think I don't have a problem with that.
What do you think Mr. Trump means by that?
I think he's setting up the argument that the election is rigged so that when he loses, and I believe he will lose, he will end up delegitimizing the outcome of the election. And that would be a total travesty, a very anti-democratic travesty. I worry that that would be taken on into the Congress, that there would be efforts to try to impeach Hillary Clinton. You know, Bill Maher on Friday night called it a slow coup. If that is the setup to some kind of slow coup where they use the instrumentalities of democracy like Congress to delegitimize the president, that would be a travesty. I hope That's not what he's doing.
I don't think he is. And, we heard during the debate when he said, I want to wait and see what happens, and so much was made of that. But I think that is a completely fair point. I'm sure Al Gore, if he would have said in a debate, I'm going to fully accept the election results, and then we find out it comes down to 400 odd votes in Florida, we know he wouldn't have conceded right there.
Trump
He did
has
come
not
back
said
and contest
yet that he will accept the election
because he
results.
wants to see what happens. Look, we've heard from Governor Pence, we've heard from those around him that if it's a clear and concise result and there is nothing to contest, he won't contest it. But if it does come down to a few hundred votes, which it certainly could, if it's a 269 electoral race, the stakes are high, and he's going to ensure that every vote is
Why
counted.
wouldn't he say that? If something quirky happens, of course I'll contest. But of course I'm going to accept the outcome of democracy. I mean, this is all about us loving this country, and it's the foundations of it. Why wouldn't he say that? Of course he'll accept the outcome.
Well, and this is where I think people hear different things when they watch debates. I heard, I want to wait and see what happens, because there could be an event like that. That was the footnote of the statement. But Democrats obviously heard the election's rigged, he's setting this up in case he loses. So I think it all depends on how you hear the...
I think that's a very good point. I think we all hear things very differently in this election.
And that said, I want to focus a little bit on the Hispanic vote, because Hispanic voters are driving these long lines in Florida and Nevada. The Hispanic early voting up 103% in Florida, 85% in Nevada, up in Georgia 147%. Haley, what does that say about Mr. Trump's message to Hispanic voters? Why are they turning out in droves?
Well, I'm excited to see the Latino community turning out, and I think we do have to wait and see how they vote. We don't know that all of these Latino voters have cast their vote for Clinton. In fact, Nate Cohn at the New York Times had an article, Cuban voters return home to Trump in Florida. We saw a 20-point gain among Cuban voters just in the last month. So,
except there's this Univision poll that says, and they break it down by descent, right? They say Cuban voters, 49% Trump, 42% Clinton. That's quite unusual.
But read the Puerto Rican one.
Puerto Rican one, 71% Clinton, 19% Trump.
So we'll see if that poll's accurate. I just think that it's premature to say every Hispanic voter, let's drop them in the Hillary bucket, because I think there's a lot of diversity among the Latino community, and
absolutely.
a lot of folks who care about the economy more than they care about immigration, let's say.
So why do you think so many Hispanics are turning out to vote?
Well, it's obvious from the day one of his campaign, day absolute one, when he talked about Mexicans being rapists or whatever, that it's started a really negative relationship, we'll say, with the Latino community, and then his immigration policy, building a wall, you name it. We've heard all of these before, including capping off with his insults of Alicia Machado. But what's really interesting, I think, about this early vote number, especially with Latinos and African Americans, is that the Clinton campaign targeted sporadic voters or first-time voters in this early vote numbers. So what you're seeing is that for every 1 out of every 3 Latino voters is a sporadic voter, which is very exciting for people who do this stuff on the ground, because that means you don't have to chase the very difficult voter on election day. You're getting all of that in early. Same thing, 1 out of 5 in Florida, 1 out of 5 African American voters was a sporadic voter. In Michigan, same thing. We have early absentee vote, and 30,000 of the Democratic voters were sporadic voters in that early absentee number. So those are all encouraging signs for the Clinton
We'll
team.
see what happens on Election Day, though, right?
Yeah,
Kaylee McEnany,
absolutely.
Jennifer Granholm, thanks so much for stopping by.
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, still to cover, the newsroom defines election 2016, but do all voters share a dark vision of America? I wanted to know, so we're going to talk to first-time voters to get their take on this race. Adriana Andreas is here. She's a senior at Howard University and a Clinton supporter. Tom Crean joins me. He's a freshman at George Washington University who supports Trump. And Robert Wines is a freshman at American University who is voting for third-party candidate Evan McMullin. Welcome to all of you. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having
Because this is really, you guys are 18.
Yep.
Adriana, you're 20.
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of people wonder, will this election, since it's been so divisive, do you feel cynical already at the age of 18?
You know, Carol, I think it has been divisive, but when the election results do come in, I think we as a nation are going to move past it. We have a robust design for our government that really prevents any one person from really destroying the government. So I feel like people giving doomsday predictions are a little out there, because we are going to come together at the end of the day as Americans.
Because, a lot of people don't think that.
Well, I completely agree with Tom and what he said there. Basically, because what everybody's forgetting is we do have a House, we have a Senate, that no matter who gets elected president, there's always a way to have a check on them. And what I think everybody's also forgetting is the fact that, especially in regards to conservatives, to maintain conservative values, it has to be done mostly in the House and the Senate in this election.
So Adriana, the name calling that's been going on in the on both sides, right?
Yep.
Does that, I don't know, did that color your impression of politics and the way things should be run in this country?
Yes, definitely. As someone whose family came from Haiti, so my family's come from immigrants, I have to disagree with the two gentlemen on the side. I think this country is going to be divisive because you're seeing this hatred, this misogyny, this white privilege come up in America and in politics, and you're seeing this person who is so gung-ho on making it divisive, sitting people back, separating families. So I think it's very, troubling to hear people say they don't see that happening if Donald Trump becomes elected, or even Hillary Clinton. This country has a lot of battles that we saw come into play, and we're going to need to fix some of those.
So the checks and balances thing doesn't quite work with you?
No, it does not.
So what would you say to Adriana?
You know, I think Trump really does get a bad rap. I personally voted for Trump as my first ever vote, and I think he does get a bad rap because he is a movement of the people. Like, the establishment has been against him from the beginning, and I think that's kind of a uniquely American campaign in a way, because we as a country, against the odds, beat Great Britain.
But how would you explain to Adriana Trump's remarks about Hispanics, his remarks about organizations like Black Lives Matter?
I think a lot of it is taken out of context. Like, Trump, I do believe, is a compassionate and intelligent man, and a lot of it is taken out of context and manipulated by his political enemies, which are many. So
do you agree with that? Because you're also a Republican, but you're voting for Evan McMullin.
Well, what it came down to here is I looked at both candidates, and I'd venture to say that they're equally as divisive, because when you look at Donald Trump, he has definitely said a lot of questionable things. But at the same time, when you look at Hillary Clinton, it's just going to be the same failed policies that we've seen in the Obama administration. It's going to be the fact that she's going to expand Obamacare to the point where it's going to be unsustainable, and it's only going to make it worse in the long run. So I couldn't find myself voting for either candidate who I think is going to do bad things for America on both sides of the aisle. So that's why I found myself voting for Evan McMullin.
See, this is making me feel like there's a big split even among young people.
There is a huge split, I would say, among us, yes. But I think one thing we all can agree on is that as young people or millennials, we look at the issues. We're not swayed by, the celebrity of it all. We actually cared about the issues and the policies, and that's one thing I think is great about our generation, is that we're understanding that politics isn't just a game, it's our lives.
So that said, what advice would you give to older voters when you sit around the dinner table listening to your parents talk about politics, or you're out and about and you hear some old people, talking about politics? What advice would you give them? What do you want to say to them?
I would say that no candidate is entitled to our vote. They have to work for it. And it's something that we are making known now because it's going to affect us in the future, right? We're voting for someone who's going to care about us for the next 4 years. Three of us are in college, so we understand what's going on with our student loan, our student debt, when we're going to graduate, what jobs are we going to get, how much we're going to get paid for it. And so we're making decisions based on our lives and ourselves and not on anyone else.
So what advice would you have for...
Well, my advice would be to not discount young people's political opinions, because that too often happens. We're the largest voting bloc now as millennials, and we want to be heard. So I feel like the advice I'd give to the older generation is definitely hear where millennials are going, what we're thinking, and hear us out.
So, Robert?
In regards to everybody's vote, I'd venture to say that everybody needs to vote their conscience, and that's essentially what I did at the end of the day.
But what makes you angry when you're listening to the older generation talk about politics? What bugs you about it?
What really bugs me is the fact that a lot of times I feel that the millennial vote is completely ignored, even though we're the biggest voting bloc in this election. So, and on top of that, I think there's essentially a view of ignorance in regards to millennials, simply because of the new generation, a lot of the new technology that a lot of the older generation is not used to. So what I think is people just have to be more accepting to millennials, but at the same time I also think that millennials also have to be more accepting of traditional values that were that are greatly found in the older generations.
I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that. You know what he means by that, Adriana?
I don't. When I think of traditional values, I think of a system of systematic oppression, racism. So I can't really resonate with that. Someone whose family, like I said before, coming from Haiti for freedom and hasn't been able to experience that, I don't think traditions are the best way to look at it. And that's why I think I'm voting for Hillary Clinton, because there's always this negative connotation of progressive, but I see it someone moving forward, understanding the issues, the problems, and working towards a better solution.
All right, I have to leave it there. And Adriana, Andreas, Tom Cream, Robert Wines, thanks to all of you for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
I'm so happy you're voting, and I'm so happy you're so well informed. That's awesome. All right, Hillary Clinton during this campaign, Khizr Khan, the Muslim father of a soldier killed during the Iraq War, his takedown of Donald Trump at the Democratic Convention gaining even more traction when Mr. Trump returned fire, sparking a back and forth that lasted several days. And now Khan is hammering home his message for Clinton right before Election Day.
Today, I have a few questions for Donald Trump. Donald Trump, would my son, Captain Humayun Khan, have a place in your America? Would Muslims have a place in your America? Would Latinos have a place in your America? Would African American have a place in your America, Donald Trump? Would anyone who isn't like you have a place in your America, Donald Trump? Well, thankfully, Mr. Trump, this isn't your America.
Joining me now from Boston, Khizr Khan. Welcome, Mr. Khan.
Hello.
Hello, and thank you for being here. Your speech in New Hampshire last night, you seem moved by the positive reaction from the crowd. What was that like?
It was really a reaffirmation of our journey and our belief that this nation, this country is of good people. At the bottom of all of this debate and political process, this nation is of good people with good values, and that is why you saw the reaction of the crowd when I reminded all of us what wonderful values we have enshrined in our Constitution and what is at stake in this election.
You've been so deep into this election now. I wonder how you would characterize it.
I said it last night and I'll repeat, this election has been divisive. This election, because of Donald Trump's rhetoric, had been excluding others, excluding minorities, division between communities, hateful, un-American rhetoric that has no place, has never been like this in the history of this country, and never will again ever happen, because the good people of this country have made up their mind. The enthusiasm that I have seen throughout my travel, throughout while I have been speaking to various civic and community organizations, the enthusiasm in support of Hillary Clinton, in rejection of Donald Trump, you will be so pleased to know that that the firm belief in the goodness of America prevails in this country.
Well, but the polls have tightened. It could be a close election. It's looking that way now if you look at the poll of polls, if you look at national polls. So Donald Trump's message is resonating with a large part of the elective body in this country.
Carol, we live, and our democracy is two-party system. And these numbers and these facts do reflect reality on the ground. But personally speaking, in my observation and thereafter, the enthusiasm in support of the good values, Hillary Clinton is the only candidate that embodies the positive values, the values that distinguish this community, this society, this country among the rest of the nations in the world. there is so much support for her that these results are going to be in her favor. I have observed with my own eyes. I have observed community to community. Sometimes those reactions are not reflected in the polls, but at personal level, I am so enthusiastic. I'm so positive about the result in favor of Secretary Clinton.
I did want to ask you about what's going on in Mosul right now. Donald Trump has called it a disaster. Arwa Damon has been in the middle of the battlefield. We're going to show that story in the next hour of Newsroom. I just wondered if you had time to pay attention to that and how you think that's going.
Look, these are very serious matters of our armed forces. These are matters of defense. These candidates, and especially temperamentally unsuitable candidate for presidency, Donald Trump, should not be commenting on these matters. These are very delicate matters of defense, matters for our armed forces and our leadership to handle. Instead of for political expediency, this candidate continues to interfere in without realizing the delicacy of the matter our armed forces are handling. So I leave that in the good hands of our military leaders. They have the interest of the country and the best of country in their mind and in their heart, so I fully trust them, but I don't trust Donald Trump, and I will caution him again not to interfere with these delicate matters of our national security and our defense.
Well, what do you think that your son would say if he knew that you were so involved in the election on his behalf?
Carol, I have repeated, and I'll say that again, he passed away in 2004. We mourned privately. We continue to grieve privately. We are private people, but enough is enough. When Donald Trump started his bigotry, started talking about banning Muslims, throwing out Hispanic Americans, disrespecting women, disrespecting our judges, somebody had to speak. We spoke on behalf of the children that were scared at that time. They would reach out to us and say, is this true that this will take place? Somebody had to stand. Sometime in a citizen's life, there comes a time that your personal interest, your personal preference, your personal security takes backstage interest of your country, interest of others. So if Captain Humayun Khan was standing right here next to me, he will applaud that we are speaking. Our journey had been in the interest of other, for the better of other, and that is why we stand for the candidate Hillary Clinton, because she is embodiment of those values. So Captain Humayun Khan will be very proud of us and will encourage us to continue to do that, because in his life, to the last breath, he spent that for the care of others.
All right, Kazir Khan, thank you so much. 50 points after the FBI once again clears Hillary Clinton in that email investigation. CNN business correspondent Allison Cossack has more. Good morning.
Good morning, Carol. You are watching a stock market that is expecting a Hillary Clinton win on Tuesday. This is a market that has been closely watching what's been happening in the news. I'm talking about the election, and we've been watching it play out in the stock market. You look at the past week, the markets have really been struggling as we watch the polls between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton tighten. You saw the nervousness in those numbers on Wall Street, but then in just a snap overnight when that news came out about the FBI clearing Hillary Clinton, we saw the futures jump, and we knew when the opening bell rang this morning that we would see a huge rally, as you're seeing right now, the Dow up 266 points. Why is that? Well, Donald Trump, as far as Wall Street sees it, represents disruption. He represents change. Those are things that make Wall Street feel uneasy. They look toward Hillary Clinton as sort of the continuity candidate, and that is why you were seeing the rally this morning. Interestingly enough, macroeconomic advisors, a group of analysts, have predicted that if Hillary Clinton wins, we would...
Thanks so much for joining me. We are live from our nation's capital, where it is one gorgeous day. I'm Carol Costello. The clock is ticking, and the decision finally near. We are now just one day away from Americans choosing their next president, and the campaigns are racing to cover as much ground as possible. Hillary Clinton, Tim Kaine, and their star surrogates spanning out across the battleground states where the election could be won or lost in these final hours. Clinton pulling out all the stops for a star-studded event in Philadelphia tonight. She and her family will host President Obama, and the First Lady, Bruce Springsteen, will perform alongside John Bon Jovi. Donald Trump barnstorming 5 states as well today as running mate Mike Pence hits 4. Trump's children will also be on the trail. As time runs short, lines have grown long. Some voters waited for hours to cast early votes this weekend, and there's growing evidence of a huge turnout among Latino voters. The Trump campaign balking at some polling stations, adding hours to accommodate the overflow crowds. Let's begin this morning with Jason Carroll. He's following the Trump campaign. Good morning, Jason.
And good morning to you. Donald Trump calling this a marathon, Carol, and he is running to as many key states as possible in these final hours, including the state of Florida here, where, as you know, historically, it's always close. In the recent polling bearing that out, one poll showing Clinton up by 1, another showing Trump and Clinton tied at 45-45. This is a must-win state. So what do you do going forward if you're the Trump campaign in terms of strategy? You hit this state hard. And in terms of strategy, you keep driving home your message, repealing and replacing Obamacare. Keep talking about the so-called rigged system, the Trump campaign saying that the FBI director's most recent decision is more evidence of the so-called rigged system. But once again, this is a must-win state for the Trump campaign. The Clinton campaign encouraged, but what you were talking about, the early Latino voter turnout here, they say that's going to favor them. The Trump campaign saying, look, they can still squeak out a win here in the state of Florida. But in terms of going forward, they're also going to have to flip a blue state. So where do you do that? Perhaps in the upper Midwest, perhaps a place like Michigan. Wisconsin looking more like a long shot, maybe in the Rockies as well, maybe a state like Colorado. So make no mistake, in terms of going forward, the Trump campaign feels as though they have a pass, several passes to get to 270, but all of those passes involve flipping a blue state and also hitting as many key states as possible. After they're done here in Florida, they're going to be heading to Pennsylvania, then New Hampshire, and then finally ending up in the state of Michigan. Carol?
All right, Jason Carroll, thanks so much. This is Hillary Clinton in White Plains. She's about to take off to continue her campaign. Let's listen in.
But I'm really excited about having a chance to make all these stops today. The event tonight at Independence Hall is really meaningful to me, about where it is and everyone who's there.
I have jumped over the years, and it seems to me that over time, you've been often ahead of your time. You've been sometimes misunderstood. You've fought off a lot of prejudice. Do you think that today America understands you and is ready to accept you?
Well, Kim, I think I have some work to do to bring the country together. As I've been saying in these speeches in the last few days, I really do want to be the president for everybody, people who vote for me, people who vote against me, because I think that these splits, these divides that have been not only exposed but exacerbated by the campaign on the other side are ones that we really do have to bring the country together.
Can you do that?
Yes, absolutely. I love this country, and I believe in our people, and we have a big agenda ahead of us, but I'm excited. I think we will get a lot done, and I do think we'll bring the country together.
All right, guys.
Make a tomorrow and all. We're just going to work until the last vote is counted.
And how much damage?
Excuse me, guys. Guys, can all tell us, please go back on the plane.
We're on a good track.
We have a few more photos taken off. Please go back on the plane, guys. Guys, go back on the plane. You guys, we're here. Everyone needs to go under the wing first and then on the plane. Can everyone please move back?
All right, we're going to break away. Hillary Clinton about to board her plane to continue campaigning in, 4 states today. So let's break this all down, shall we? With me now is Dan Pfeiffer, CNN political commentator and former senior advisor to President Obama, and Matt Schlapp, Donald Trump surrogate and former George W. Bush political director. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Do you feel the excitement?
Oh, yeah. I feel the fatigue.
Do you feel the same?
Oh, absolutely.
What do the candidates feel like on this day? One last day to get their message out.
I mean, they're exhausted, right? They have been going at this for 2 years. They're basically on autopilot. But what is keeping them alive and keeping them awake is the same as keeping the staff awake, which is they can see the finish line in the enthusiasm they're going to feel from the crowds in every stop they have today.
Is it possible for them to sleep at night? Because I would just be...
Yeah, well, first of all, I worked for President Bush, and he liked to be home. He used to say sleeping in his own bed with his own pillow. And it was unusual for him to remain in cities overnight. Donald Trump just seems like a rock band to sleep on the plane and get ready for the next event. And the stories you're reading says he's one of these people like Mitt Romney who doesn't require that much sleep and is very energetic. And this is what, Bob Dole did this in 1996, where he just campaigned continuously the last 24 hours. And I think what you're seeing from Trump is something similar. And it is unusual to be that aggressive in the final stretch. And it plays into his strength, which is this enthusiasm gap between Trump and Clinton. The Trump supporters are very excited about going over there because they've lost twice, right? They want to win. We want to win. And for Hillary Clinton, it's just more methodical. Not quite as much love there, but, she's up in a lot of polls, so I think they feel good about their chances.
Okay, and early voting. I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second, because those voters are certainly jazzed, supposedly, about Hillary Clinton, right? But I want to head back out to White Plains because Breonna Keeler was taking part in that huge, giant press conference that Hillary Clinton threw at the last moment. So, Breonna, what did we glean from that?
Well, she's certainly very ready for this to be over and to be going through this final day here. I'll tell you, we're being ushered onto the plane, and you can see Secretary Clinton as she's getting on the plane. I'm actually going to take you on the plane with me if I can, Carol. We are totally flying by the seat of our pants here as we try to get out of White Plains. But we have 4 stops today. We're going to Pittsburgh, and then we're going to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Let's walk this way, and we'll head on to the press section of the plane. We'll be going on to Philadelphia, where Secretary Clinton will be campaigning with President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama, and she's going to end her night in Raleigh tonight in what has been really just a nasty, fast-moving, unprecedented general election campaign battle. Now, you talk to officials here. I'm just going to go to the side as we get everyone on. You talk to campaign officials, and it really comes down to their get-out-the-vote efforts and their ground game, and they're feeling very confident about it. They're looking at early vote turnout. They think it's giving them the advantage, but of course polls have tightened, so there's this anxiety about can anything happen going on. Carol, I'm going to toss it back to you because we're here at the end of the press line getting onto the plane.
Okay. Yeah, and I wouldn't want to make that large Secret Service man angry. So, Breonna, we'll let you get on board that plane, and we'll check back with you when you arrive at your destination. Breonna Keeler, many thanks. So let's talk about early voting, because in states like Florida and North Carolina, there was this huge surge of Hispanic voters turning out. What does that tell you?
Well, I think it shows that there's tremendous enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton. It means that the Clinton campaign is running a top-notch field organization. They have basically won Nevada before Election Day. They put that in the bank. That's a key Trump state. It's one where his name's on the building. It's really key to Andy Path at 270. They've won that. Florida is in a better place now than in 2012. And it shows organization and enthusiasm, which are the 2 elements you need for a successful presidential campaign.
So Clinton supporters keep talking about organization, organization, organization. You don't hear that so much from Trump supporters.
Actually, as Dan knows, the organization's done by the committees and these victory committees, both for the DNC and the RNC. And the RNC has taken the lead and actually had more people and more offices on the ground in these battleground states than in any previous election. I think our high water mark for a ground game was 2004, and we're going to see how we do this time. I think the key on the early vote is more people are voting early, and Democrats tend to do better on the early voting than Republicans. We tend to do better on Election Day. So people are assuming that just because so many more people are voting early, that those trends will keep up on Election Day. That's the big question. We don't know if they will. We also don't know what the turnout's going to be. And then with Donald Trump, there are 2 things to his advantage. He does have a huge enthusiasm gap, 10 points. He also has people, let's face it, who are going to vote for him, but they don't want to talk about it. They're not telling pollsters.
The secret
and this
Trump
is, do you think there are some? Do you know any? Most people I know some. And the question is...
Most Trump supporters I talk to are way out with it.
Well,
They're not shy.
But this is the question. On Election Day, it is a pain. I had to wait in a long line to vote early. If you're enthusiastic about your candidate, you'll do anything to go vote. If you're less enthusiastic about your candidate, life is complicated. Sometimes things come up. That's why that matters.
So Donald Trump has... he sort of called into question those long lines, right? And called into question that elections officials decided to keep the polls open to accommodate all those people who wanted to vote. Why do you think he's doing that?
I have no idea why Donald Trump says the things he says. I think it's deeply irresponsible. In many cases, he's accusing states run by Republican governors of rigging the elections for Hillary Clinton, which seems unlikely. We have a tradition in this country. John Kerry did it in 2004, Al Gore did in 2000. John McCain and Mitt Romney, when they lost the election, they conceded and tried to bring the country together. You know, and Al Gore had a case to make.
I was going to say, Al Gore, I wouldn't go with that.
He made his case.
For a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah.
It was the state mandate. I was there in Florida. That was state mandated recount.
But he made his case after the election was over.
But then, what was the first thing? And what the first thing he did was, after the Supreme Court made its decision, was concede to President Bush, help bring the country together. The question is Donald Trump going to take that responsible position? Everything he's done this campaign suggests no, but hope springs eternal.
So if Donald Trump does lose, will he gracefully concede, or will he continue?
Absolutely. But I think, like we all know, we're going to make sure that the results get the proper... In some of these states, the polls are awfully tight when you look at the battleground states. Some of them show, many of them, 5 or 6 of them show a 1-point difference. Some of those states require a recount. That should happen. 2000 was unbelievable. I think Al Gore went too far in pursuit of this, and I think it actually hurt him. And I actually think the bad thing about that is it hurts the president who comes in as well. I do think we have to get through this. I also think it's wrong for all of these court cases that are going on at the last minute. Let's simply follow the rules. You know, I was in line on Sunday to vote, and I was surprised how many people were in line. It's a great thing in a democracy. I want everyone to vote. And you know what the election officials said? When the time came, he said, everyone who's in line, we're going to make sure every one of you votes, no matter how long it takes. That's a fair interpretation of the rule. I was totally fine with that. Where it gets strange is when you have the Ninth Circuit coming in and telling Arizona that they have to change their voting laws at the last minute. When they tell people who are trying to have clean voter files that they can't do that, that they have to keep people who shouldn't be voting on the rolls. That's where it gets funny, and I think that's where people start to think, do we have a really good system? Let's just follow the rules. I'm for everybody voting.
Right. Well, I mean, you may be. A lot of your party is not.
That's not true.
That is absolutely true. Changing the rules in North Carolina, Ohio. North Carolina documented evidence of getting rid of Sunday early voting because a high percentage of African Americans vote on that day. That has been a tried and true practice of the Republican Party for many years now.
I just completely reject this. I think the fact is this. I think we ought to have laws, and we ought to follow those laws, and we shouldn't break those laws just because it's near Election Day. Let's follow them. By the way, in a lot of these states, elections are controlled at the state and the local level. So a lot of these places where we're talking about, there's Democratic elected officials as well. And let's just follow. I think people look at this process and they say they want it to be transparent and they want it to be fair, and that's what I want.
But the good news is there just has been no evidence of widespread voter fraud in any recent
Carol,
election.
he just said he went to Florida for the whole month. I assume I went for the whole month. Why did we all go? We all went because when races are close, it comes back down to the subjective opinions of people on the ground. And we all know it, which is why we send operatives. That's why both parties do. And if this race turns out to be close, it's important that both parties and both campaigns are represented throughout that process so that people feel like the voting process has integrity.
And they have been through history,
right? There is a difference, though, between state-mandated recounts. If a race is so close that the candidate, either a recount is mandated or the losing candidate has the opportunity to call for one, that should absolutely happen, should follow all the rules. There's a difference between that and suggesting that there is voter fraud or calling things rigged if there is
or doing what the Ninth Circuit did, was changing Arizona's laws at the very end where the Supreme Court had to intervene and say, no, Arizona gets to set its election laws. All of that is wrong.
All right, I got to leave it there, but the important thing is go vote. Please go vote.
That's right.
Because
that's right.
That's what makes our country. Wow, right back to White Plains, New York. You see the Clinton campaign plane sitting on the tarmac there. Our Breonna Keeler is on board that plane. Hillary Clinton's plane about to take off to Pittsburgh for a big rally there. Breonna, tell us what's going on inside that plane.
Well, Carol, the engines have just fired up. We are all sitting down and we are ready to go for our first stop, which is going to be Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You hear they're making the announcements right now just before we depart. But we were just down on the tarmac a short while ago when we were talking, and Hillary Clinton was talking to reporters, and she said she's excited to be going to battleground states. She also said she understands that there is work to do to bring the country together, but she also seemed to be very happy, of course, that this is over. We're just starting to move now, actually. And it's really all going to be about turnout. That is what Hillary Clinton was stressing. And I'll tell you, her campaign is feeling pretty good because they really have a behemoth of a ground game operation. And Donald Trump just pretty much has a non-existent one. He's been relying very much on the Republican Party apparatus, and it's not really quite where the Clinton machine of voter turnout volunteer organization is. So that's really going to be the test as we move into tomorrow, Carol.
I was just curious, now that Hillary Clinton has been cleared in this latest email investigation, is Huma Abedin on the plane?
And what did he ask? I do not believe that she is on the plane. She's been absent for some time. And I will tell you, the campaign is, I think, happy that they heard this from the FBI yesterday, that they're not changing their assessment in July. But at the same time, there's a feeling that damage has been done. And certainly the original sin of all of that was how Hillary Clinton set up her email. So, that's something they've had to deal with through the campaign, and they'll continue to. And, we're going through the bumps here as we are about to taxi. Carol, I'm going to sign off so that we can, we're going to head off now.
Okay. I thought the flight attendant was going to yell at you there for a second. Brianna Kayla reporting live from inside Hillary Clinton's campaign plane. Thanks so much. We'll check back with Brianna once she gets to Pittsburgh. But let's head to Michigan now, because we're minutes away from President Obama speaking in Ann Arbor. It's a sign of change in that state. CNN correspondent Jessica Schneider is live in Ann Arbor to tell us more about that. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Carol. A rigorous final week of campaigning for President Obama. He has been hopscotching around the country, touching down soon here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he'll speak at the University of Michigan. You can see behind me the crowd of that all-important vote, millennials. Of course, this is a president who has preached hope and change and inspiration. His job in the final few hours, inspire people to get out there and vote. Of course, as Brianna said, the numbers are crucial for Hillary Clinton, hence this frenzied activity, especially here in Michigan, where we have seen a flurry of the candidates themselves as well as surrogates. Chelsea Clinton will be introducing President Obama when he speaks here a little bit after noon. We've also seen Donald Trump in the state. He was here last night. He plans to hold a late-night campaign rally in Grand Rapids later today. His children are also stumping throughout the state today. The Trump team has been barreling down hard on Michigan, and that's all been the result of some tightening poll numbers. We can show you the latest poll that was released late last week. The numbers definitely tightening. Hillary Clinton standing at 42%, Donald Trump at 38%. She is still leading by 4 points, but what's important in that poll is that it's down considerably from the 11-point lead that she had about a month ago. Of course, they're vying for those 16 electoral votes. President Obama out here today to galvanize those voters because they understand that at this point, Carol, Michigan counts.
All right, Jessica Schneider reporting live from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So let's talk about all of this. With me now is Reed Wilson. He's a national correspondent for The Hill. David Lauter also joins me. He's the Washington bureau chief of the Los Angeles Times. And Mark Preston is here, CNN Politics executive editor. Welcome to all of you. So Mark, what's going on in Michigan?
Well, clearly the Clinton campaign has decided that they need to shore up any support that they've lost in Michigan. The Trump people will tell you that their internal polling over the past couple of weeks was closing in on that. And clearly the Clinton campaign must have seen that as well, because they wouldn't be spending this very important time, in Detroit over the past couple of days. Look, I think Michigan is still a reach for Donald Trump to win. But the fact of the matter is, when you see the Clinton campaign going in there with surrogates and herself, and we saw Bill Clinton there last week, it says something.
So the Michigan governor, Rick Snyder, who's a Republican, said that he wouldn't say who he's voting for. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Does that carry any significance?
No, Rick Snyder has been I don't want to say a never Trumper, but he's never been on the Trump train for a while. What I think we're seeing in this last little bit of travel around the country here, the Clinton team is trying to goose a very specific demographic to turn out to the polls, and it's African American voters. We've seen a huge spike in Hispanic voters in states like Nevada and Florida. The African American turnout numbers have lagged, especially in states like North Carolina and Michigan. President Obama being in Ann Arbor, that's different though. That's aimed at turning out younger voters who generally vote Democratic, but who may not have turned out as robustly as some of those other.
So something that was interesting this morning, Robbie Mook was on the, Clinton's campaign manager. He was on the morning shows, and he said that there's this surge in Hispanic voters and also in Asian voters, but he didn't mention African American voters, which I found interesting. All of a sudden, it's Asian voters.
Yeah, well, they definitely have had a problem with African American turnout. There's no question about it. You look at North Carolina. Now, you could argue that that was partly because the state changed the rules to make it harder for African American voters. But in Michigan, in Ohio, you've seen a downturn in African American vote in places like Cleveland. So that's a problem for the Clinton campaign. It could be a problem in a state like Pennsylvania as well. So they want to shore that up. They think they can, and they certainly have the Get Out the Vote operation that's been targeted at doing precisely this. And, they demonstrated during the primaries that they do know how to execute their game plan, and they consistently turned out the voters that they needed.
Well, let's talk about specifically that game plan, because they reported the Clinton campaign, that is, some very impressive numbers.
Right. So let's look, and again, we have to take them at their word for what they're telling us, but let's take a look at what the Clinton campaign, Carol, has said they did this weekend alone. They said they've knocked on 6.2 million doors this past weekend, and they called 8.1 million voters, and since September, they have contacted 45 million different voters. Now,
45 million voters.
Right. Now, that's significant because we pay a lot of attention to these big rallies and what have you, but elections are won and lost by volunteers and by voter contact by those who are working in key states. And if we look at the Republican side as well, so Republicans are telling us now that they've had 600 staff that have been working this election, which is significant given the fact that they say there was 800 people that they only had in their ground game operation back in 2012. And this is really part and parcel with what happened after their loss in 2012 when they realized the Obama machine was so strong. In addition to that, they said that they knocked on at least 4 million doors this weekend and that they've had more volunteers now than they've ever had in 44 years.
Well, Newt Gingrich, Reed, said that Republicans have the best ground game in 44 years.
They very well may have built a better ground game than they've ever had, but the difference between the Democratic operation and the Republican operation is stunning. Mark just mentioned 600 staffers on the Republican side. Take a look not only at the Trump campaign, but the Republican National Committee and state parties in these key battleground states. We went through the Federal Election Commission reports. We found about 1,400 staffers in the key battleground states. On the Democratic side, in those same states, the Clinton campaign and the DNC, we found 5,100 employees in all those states. Take a look at Minnesota, where Donald Trump was yesterday, sort of a Hail Mary throw in a traditionally Democratic state. The Trump campaign, or the Republican state party out there had 11 people on payroll in September. The Democratic Party had 225. There are 5-to-1 margins in states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Florida, almost a 10-to-1 margin in Nevada until some late staff shipped over there from the Republicans.
So some people might be hearing those numbers and say, then why isn't Hillary Clinton just pounding him in those battleground states?
Well, partisanship matters, and you've got probably 90% of voters who have made up their minds long ago. Probably 3/4 of voters made up their minds before the campaign even started. But when you get down to the margins, the last few votes, ground game matters. So, you look at a state like Florida, look at Dade County, Miami. More than 88% of the 2012 turnout, they've already voted. That doesn't happen by itself. It happens because a campaign is out there dragging people out. And by and large, that doesn't seem to be the Trump campaign that's doing that. Now, maybe they can make up the gap with a huge surge on Election Day. That's their hope. That's a really tall order.
The interesting thing about those Hispanic voters who turned out in such massive numbers in Florida and also in Nevada is a third of them were were people who have never voted before?
Right. So what's interesting is we were looking at the data last night, and from 2008 to 2016, we saw a 105% increase in Hispanic early voters. Now, we don't know if they're all going to vote for Hillary Clinton, but, you know, if I'm going to Las Vegas with $1, I'm betting on the fact that they voted for Hillary Clinton, or by and large. In Nevada alone, 30% of Clark County, which is basically Las Vegas, we don't have demographic data on who actually voted, but we do know this. Hispanics make up 30% of that area. 57,000 people voted in one day alone on Friday, which goes to the Get Out the Vote operation. And two things just to note as we try to put all these numbers out there and the viewers try to understand. The Democratic operation, the Get Out the Vote operation, is a credit to what Barack Obama built from 2006 to where we stand right now. Having said that, the Republican operation is entirely buoyed by the Republican National Committee and not the Trump campaign. So that's a testament to Reince Priebus and the RNC.